You dropped this.
Well, welcome, Guy. It's great to be here. It is.
Thank you for inviting me.
Professional studio today. So one of the things I wanted to start with first is normally people tell people thank you at the end, but people stop listening towards the end. So I wanted to reverse it today and tell you thank you for the opportunity. But I also wanted to say just thank you for being such a good member of the finance community. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I guess we can unpack that. But my experience with people in finance has been where not everybody is the nicest, not everybody really wants to help you out. And so I think that you're just such a good steward of the financial community. And for everybody that maybe won't get the chance to meet you, I really, truly want to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to meet you and just have this conversation with you.
Well, it's Ryan, it's really kind of you to say thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here. I have two things that I can already riff off what you just said. One is, just gratitude. It's amazing. I mean, we had, just before I met you, we had an investor dinner. We went around the table. It was just after the election, and we knew that some people would be feeling jubilant, some people would be feeling raw. And we asked everybody to say something that they're grateful for. And just somebody said it so well, an attitude of gratitude,
right? Yeah,
is just a really smart way to live your life. You live a better life, so you're well on the way by expressing gratitude. In terms of the finance community, I mean, I certainly Warren Buffett has been the same, and in a way, it's kind of long-term greedy,
right?
And what comes up for me when you say that, before I hand the questioning back to you, is that, so I mean, we have such similar backgrounds in how we started off in finance, and the people in those kinds of shops are seeing their world as a game to win at all costs, and they're not playing the infinite game. And one of the things that I think that drew us in the direction that we went is that we saw people like Warren Buffett playing the infinite game. And in a way, to be generous to the finance community is what Warren Buffett says, long-term greedy. We're playing the infinite game. So,
yeah.
So I thanks for the thanks. Realize there's a self-interest as well. It's the best way to play the game in a way.
Yeah. Well, and this is a full circle moment for me, because when I read your book, I was starting out, I was young, I was looking for guidance, and I was in a small town, and I was thinking, man, do I need to be in New York? I'm like, Buffett's not New York. I read about this guy Spier. He moves from New York to Zurich. And it just gave me comfort that there was other people out there. And we'll talk about communities in a little bit later. But it's just one of those things where sometimes when you're young and starting out, you're looking for somebody that it's like, man, who can I look to? Who can I read about? Who can be a mentor from afar, that I feel like I want to do it like that. And just, having that direction, having somebody where you say, okay, this is a person who I feel has done it the right way. Let me kind of follow in their footsteps. And for me, that was you. And it was such a instrumental time of my life to build my practice that way. And then it's such a neat experience to meet you and be like, hey, the person that I thought he was, that's who he actually is.
Good. That, I'm relieved.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, and so we'll, it's just a really neat thing to, where I said, I feel like the finance gods are shining down on me, that they put me in this moment because I've done things properly and to make the decisions to get where, I am today, and of course where you are as well. So it's kind of a fun thing.
So two thoughts to riff off that is, one is that I feel like now there's a kind of direct lineage to when you say that to Warren Buffett, because I showed up and Ryan and I yesterday were having lunch in the same place where I did the charity lunch with Warren Buffett. We had a great time, and we went and checked the exact spot where I was sitting with Warren Buffett. And one of the questions I had for him, and I was so that I was sick. I'd made myself sick. I was so nervous.
Okay, yeah.
That bad. And one of the questions I had for him was, I sort of I furtively I didn't sort of say pause and ask the question. I was like, it sort of came out without me realizing. I said, I'm thinking of moving to Zurich. What do you think of that? Something like that. And I just remember Warren saying, look, I think you can do this business from anywhere. And for me, I took that as a sign. It gave me the confidence later that year to decide to move to Zurich. I'm not sure if I'd not had the lunch, if I'd not asked that question to Warren and he'd not given the response that he'd given, that I would have even made the decision or made it as confidently, for sure. And so you thank me for saying you don't have to be in Manhattan, and I thank Warren for saying I don't have to be in Manhattan. It's all the same thing. Yeah. That's one thing. And then a second thing that I think is, and actually maybe you can tell me, I'm curious. I think that it took me a long while to realize that if you're not feeling like the decision you're making is slightly scary, if you don't have that kind of quickening of the pulse, then you're probably not doing something right. And I'm not saying that you should live life on the bleeding edge, kind of doing wingsuit flying or bungee jumping.
Right.
But if you're completely safe, then that's not okay as well. And it seems to me that the things that I've done that have worked out the best, I never felt completely safe. It's as if we live our lives waiting for the light to turn, red, amber, green.
Right.
It often never turns green. All we get is amber, and the amber is about as good as you're going to get. You're going to have to go for it. And so for me, that first chapter of my book was like that. I was like, wow, am I really going to write about this? In a way, moving to Zurich was like that. And I'm sure and that's when your life becomes an adventure.
And I talk about that as there's a difference between taking on risk and being reckless. So when you talk about, there's people that are just reckless with their decisions, but it's a calculated risk. And then it's also about consistency. Like, I'm not sure if you would have stayed in New York and you didn't have that lunch. I mean, the business might have burned you out because you would have felt like you were going against the grain all the time. And it's the same for me. It's like you want to do something that you feel like you can keep its consistency, but that's what investing is. It's being able to, make investments that are consistent to you and your personality that you can stick with. Because usually the number one mistake that investors make is they trade too often. Yeah. They're in the wrong stuff. And a lot of times they're doing other things that aren't really true to their personality. And so when I'm talking to young investors, it's all about reading a ton of stuff about how everybody else is doing it. There's so many ways to make money in the investment world, but you got to do enough research on each one of those so that you can figure out which one is, the right one for you, right? Whether it's a value investor or if somebody wants to be a short seller, or they want to do whatever, but you got to have, your knowledge has to be to a point where you can actually make that decision. I think there's an old saying that says, if you read an hour a day on a subject for 7 years, you'll be an expert, or you'll be. I'm just naive enough that when I read that, I'm like, oh, I think I can commit to that. Like, I'm, not that I'm any kind of expert, but I'm naive enough to say, okay, well, the time's going to pass, and I enjoy finance, so I'm going to read everything I can for the next however many years and see what happens. And I feel like with my journey, for so many years, it's the same. It's the absolute same as like compound investing. You don't really notice, and then all of a sudden you have like 3 years that completely change your life.
Yeah, Well, so I'll give you two. It's funny because sort of reactions to and extending the points that you're making. So the knowledge. I mean, is this incremental sort of like 1 hour a day, 1% better every day works out as some insane amount every year. And knowledge is one thing, but this idea that acting optimally in the situation, so it's acting in a way that you can stay in the game. So I am blown away by Monish's capacity to take, what would be for me impossible risks to take, because if I lose out, it would put me out of the game psychologically. Whereas Monish is able to lose. Mm-hmm. Having taken big risks, and he has no problem staying in the game. So in a sense, one of the reasons why I have to, at least hopefully it's in reality, but in my own mind, take less big ballsy risk, is that my mentality is such that I will end up not staying in the game if I take the really big ballsy risk. So the knowledge, so I think that, and I can say this now, I think there's been many circumstances where I've been able to say rationally, I ought to do this. But I don't feel comfortable with it. And to understand, well, actually, you have to listen to also your degree of comfort, because if it doesn't work out, your psychology will stop you. So it's not just about being rational in the world. I think many people, and I was naming somebody who's this amazing personality that I'm not going to mention because I don't have his permission, but where he's an unbelievably smart and wealthy guy, but he needs to take very, very careful steps because he's a bit like Ross Perot. Ross Perot sold his business and then kept everything in money market because that's the way he felt safe.
Yeah.
And one person would take $2 billion of the sales proceeds and only put $20 million in the stock market. Somebody else would put the whole lot in the stock market and be fine. And probably reckless is to leverage that 10 times.
And not understanding how much risk you've taken on. But we get that's where you get it's the intellectual brain versus your emotional brain.
Yes.
And I've had this conversation with many people where they'll tell me, intellectually, I know I should invest, but emotionally, I just can't do it. And so we talk about IQ, but there's also that EQ, and that's where the kind of the behavioral piece comes into play. Well, it's why is somebody that risk averse or loss averse, right? We're twice as impacted by a loss as we are a gain. Yeah. And they use that against us in political ads and things like that. And we hone in on it.
That's why I want to introduce you to this person.
Yeah.
I'm thinking very much of him. And something that I don't understand actually is that one of the beautiful things that the stock market gives you is the ability, and I've done it many times, I guess, is to just do 10% less of it to 1% of what I could do. So take the first step. And there are many positions, I would say, where I took the first step and I just didn't want to take another step, and I ended up setting it out again.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And so what's beautiful about the investment world is that you don't have to be either or. You can be in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sizing of positions is a big key. I truly think, like, when we talk about like the new world, everybody being able to trade on their cell phones, it's not like there's not that cost of like, I'm going to have to pay a commission if I get out of this stock, right? The pain can be over like that, right? You can sell whenever you want. The pain is over. The roller coaster's over. But the problem is when people are trading so often that they never get above their cost basis enough to feel like they have this cushion.
Right.
So like the dividend-based strategy, it takes 3 to 5 years to really notice those dividends or buying more shares. And like you really hit momentum with that.
Yeah.
And so like I'm constantly discussing this with people. I'm like, man, you got to be in it long enough to get away from your cost basis, to see the dividends coming back into your account, to see them buying more shares. But many investors never allow themselves to even get to that point.
And maybe, what comes up for me when you say that is that rather than thinking about investing, the result, which is always, how much money is in your account at the end of the day, that's all you can do with it, is to think about investing as a practice where, the point in buying the shares of whatever company one thinks one wants to buy shares of is actually to develop one's practice of investing rather than how much money did I make. So what is my practice? And actually something that Warren's never really talked about it in this way, but he clearly acts in this way, which is every time I think about it, I think I ought to write some kind of an essay or thought piece about it, is that a simple question to ask is, my proposed action, buy or sell, take a profit. If I now apply the rules that I'm applying in this situation for the rest of my life in every similar situation, how will it work out? And, so many times I think I'm offered opportunity to do something for expediency's sake. Mm-hmm. But actually, if I play that out, if I say, okay, if I did that every time, it's clearly not going to lead to a good result. And that helps me to make the good decision in the moment. And I would give, an example that really, really helped me early on, which I learned from Monish, was this idea of when I buy something, I can't trade it for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the point is not to say, oh my God, but this happened and I'm worried, or I really need to take a profit, or it's to say, wait, I'm not doing this to take profits or to be a good trader or to play to my fears. I'm doing this to build my investing practice. And I know if I build that practice over time, I'm going to end up in an extraordinarily good place. So we talk about in businesses about KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
What is your intermediate goal, which often will lead to good results? Maybe that's what we need to build into investor psychology.
Yep.
Don't think about the value of your portfolio. Think about your investing practice.
Well, it's just when somebody's younger and they're just starting out, it's trying to get the habit of saving and investing. Even if it's $50, if it's $50 a month. I mean, I started off doing $50 a month, and I'd buy one share of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
But I love the habit. I love the thought of just investing. So I wanted to find something that was small enough that I knew like it's a good stock, pays a dividend, that kind of thing. It wasn't necessarily that I did a ton of research on Coca-Cola. I liked the business. I knew, but it was more about just, I loved the thought of being able to buy something, like of actually being able to invest. And I think that, you have to, whatever capacity you have to figure out a way to start those habits.
Yes.
Because even though I started with $50, it's the habit.
Yes.
And so as I started making more money, you start saving more money, you start investing more money, but then all of a sudden you're developing momentum because you see it start to do well.
Yes.
And that habit is kind of ingrained early.
But what I sense in you, rewinding a couple of sentences, and it's fascinating because I felt the same way, not about investors, but in other ways, is that I wouldn't say that you're desperate, but you've experienced something yourself. So forgive me, I'm going to reflect
go for it.
Two things. One is, I don't know you. I've only met you yesterday, but there's something really special is that you have a very, very good inner scorecard. In fact, you don't, one of these great lessons from the Buffett lunch was, would you rather be known as the best lover in the world, but your wife know that you're the worst? Or would you rather you and your wife know that you're the best lover in the world, but for the world to think that you're the worst? You want to live life by an inner scorecard such that it doesn't matter what people think. And you actually do that extraordinarily naturally. So for the listener, you're quietly getting better at things. And you draw great satisfaction from knowing that you're getting better, knowing that your client portfolio is growing, knowing that your capacity to teach is getting better, and you draw great, and you don't care that the world knows or doesn't know, which is something really, really special.
Well, I appreciate that.
It's very clear to me, and it's wonderful, and I and that's what you're the kind of person I need in my life because it helps me to be more like this way. So that kind of those things compound. So that's the one thing. But here's where, in your capacity as a teacher, I sense a frustration. Which is really, and I want to ask you about it, which is this. You're trying to get your students to experience the same thing. You're like, if you could just start the practice, if you could just take that tiny step, the rewards will come in time. And don't call me up on day 2 and say, but the rewards haven't come there. It's like, a watched kettle never boils or something.
Right.
And it's really hard. I mean, I don't know if you've had any success in teaching that.
Yeah, I have, but normally in a class of like 30 to 35 people or whatever, I can tell that like 5 of them are locked in, that I'm really connecting with 5 or whatever. And I think that number's starting to grow, but I think that it's one of those things too. It's, what's the old, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
So I've had people that come back to me later, and that's where I really like, I get super excited because somebody will reach back out to me 5 years later or 7 years later, and they say, hey, I remember you said this in class. And so those memories, they can't unlearn the things I teach them.
Right.
So I'm planting the seed, just like, I don't know when the tree's going to grow. I don't know how big the tree's going to be, but I know that they can't unlearn the things that I told them, because they will message me and they'll say, if I would have only bought Apple when we were talking about it in your class, they remember those moments,
I'm gonna drop a name that nobody knows probably, but Steve might hear this, and then so if I had only bought Apple when Steve Wallman at the Berkshire meeting talked to me about it, in like 2004, but I think that what's interesting, and I don't fully understand your ecosystem, but over time, even the people who are attracted into your life will be attracted into your life because they've heard a story about you. So one of those people, former students who's written to you, will talk to somebody in a cocktail party. And even, you might get parents of students at the university who say you must take this class because you learn a lot. And so you subtly and quietly over the years, the group of students that you teach, the group of people in your life will be more oriented towards your message,
Yeah, it's the compound effect on it's the same thing.
And it's so interesting. How many people that you come across in your life understand that, compounding money, great. Not, but many people seem to stop there, and they don't realize that actually there's so many other things one can compound.
Right. It works in every other area of your life.
Yeah. And,
it's the same as goals. It's the same as exercise. It's the same, all of these things are connected.
I can't believe, despite understanding the power of compounding in financial markets, well, I might be going down a rabbit hole here, but I was a guy who did a lot of sport at university, amateur, just for myself. I wasn't a great athlete or anything. And then, going into the working world, I'd do a huge amount of sport on the weekend and then do nothing for, Monday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, I recovered. Then Thursday, I might drag myself off somewhere. So I had a very I was delivering my body very intermittent doses of exercise, and then there'd be travel, and then I'd injure myself because I really pushed myself. A weekend warrior is the kind of sportsman.
Yeah.
It's only in the last 3 or 4 years that I found myself a coach who, when he's not coaching me, he spends a very little time coaching me. He coaches a pro cycling team. And so he goes running with me. And I learned yesterday that you're a runner. And he says, you're running too fast. We've set a pace. And I'm like, but I don't even feel like I'm running. I don't feel like even I'm trying. He's like, yep, that's exactly the feeling that I want you to get. And he said, if you make 4 out of 5 of your workouts feel like this, you'll find you can build the consistency. And, I'm in my 50s. So in my 50s, I understood that I was not availing myself of the compounding effect in exercise because I was the equivalent of the trader.
Right.
Buy, sell.
Yeah.
Get out of the market, get in the market. And I wasn't learning to just consistently deliver myself an extraordinarily gentle dose of exercise on a daily basis. In a way, that's what seems to me that a lot of what you're telling people around you is like, deliver yourself a very gentle dose of investing. And you think it's nothing, buying 1 share of Coca-Cola, but it's actually a lot.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with reading. I mean, it's like, invest in yourself mentally, physically, financially, right? And it's those little, because we do it with like New Year's resolutions. I'm going to read a book every 2 days. I mean, you said something that you're not going to be able, it's all about the consistency and the sustainability of those choices. Like, can you sustain the choices that you've set for yourself? And you're talking about Buffett. I've been thinking about this for the last 5 minutes. I am haunted. I'm haunted. By him saying that he would be worth more money today had he never sold anything. If he had never sold out of anything, even the ones that went to zero, like he would have done so well. He did the
calculation.
Yeah, he did the like that he would be worth more money if he would have just let his winners win. And it's the same like Peter Lynch said that one of his worst investments, which everybody says is one of his greatest, but he went to the original 4 Home Depots. Yeah. And he invested in it, and it went up 40 times his money. Yeah. Sold out, and then it went up 400 times.
But I'm not going to take umbrage, but I'm going to take issue.
Go for it.
So first of all, now I'm haunted because I've been, Warren Buffett should be haunted by that as well because he's just sold out of half of his Apple position.
Correct.
So he should be haunted. Warren, if you're not haunted, you should be. Yeah. Although we may find out there are very good reasons for it. And I'm haunted because I've sold out I reduced my exposure in a number of cases. And so here, just to go back to a previous point, it's easy enough with retrospect to say if I hadn't sold out, I would be ... And I think of, I was in India a couple of weeks ago, and I had an investment in a company called Crizzle, and I sold out, and 400, 500. It's painful to think of the number, but let's not forget the behavioral side of it. So you need to be able to stay in the game. And I can't speak for Warren Buffett, but if your company is trading at, somebody described one of the companies I own as trading at infinite earnings. I mean, I can say it's like Ferrari is extraordinarily high valuation, but it's an extraordinary asset. But if behaviorally the thing has gone up 10 times on you, and I mean, Nick Sleep sold out of half of his Amazon position.
Right.
So I'm making an obvious point. So don't be that haunted by it. And in a way, maybe to just bring it back, forget about being haunted by that. Follow the practice.
Yeah. Well, and also too, you can look back and see those things, but there could be another investment. Like the money's got to come from somewhere. So, I talk about that with clients a lot. We'll trim a position, we'll add to it, and they'll say, "Man, we missed out." And I'm like, "Yeah, but we put the money over here, and this one did well." It's that mental accounting that people do. It just tortures you.
People pay a lot of tricks, and our mind pays a lot of tricks on us. And I can tell you what is sort of shocking to me and surprising to me is I made a conscious decision. After the financial crisis, I got rid of my Bloomberg monitor.
Yeah.
Then I decided I needed it. Then there was a period of time when I had it, but I didn't switch it on. And I actually use it more often than I used to, but I do not have any process for checking stock prices. I see them when I see them, but I don't. There's no point at which I monitor the spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. There's no point at which I switch on the Bloomberg or type. But the prices come through to me anyway. I know what the stocks are more or less, and in a way, I mean, this is the point. Is Nassim Taleb has made it so well. I don't know if he does the mathematics of this. The more often you check the price, the more often you're going to see a decline. And the less often you check the price, so if you want to make yourself miserable, check the price every day, and you'll get many days where the price is down.
Yeah.
The less you check, the more the price is going to be up, the less it's going to be down. So just don't check very often.
Yeah, that's myopic risk aversion. So the more often you check, the riskier the more often you check your holdings, the riskier they start to appear. Because you're starting to see you're seeing every uptick, every downtick, you're seeing them bounce around.
Right. So I've never heard that expression, myopic risk
aversion.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. I don't know where that comes from, but yeah, absolutely. Don't be myopic.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah. I mean because every time you see an uptick, or it's almost a call to action.
Yeah,
I got to do something.
Yeah,
I got to and so that's leads me to a great point is just talking to you about and I call that noise, right? It's like, how do I reduce the noise? And so you've kind of set things up to where you have reduced. So what are the things that you've done that you reduce the amount of just noise that's in your head?
I've done many things, but there are many more things that I would like to do. And so the things that I have done, don't check the stock price every day. Have a reading room with no devices where you can't even check the stock price. Move to Zurich.
Yeah.
The people I choose to hang out with, people who understand that mindset or embody that mindset better than I do. Choose to hang around people who are interested in businesses, not in stock prices, so where you can have fun conversations about what makes quality business, whether a business's moat is improving or not, whether a CEO who came in is doing a good job or not, rather than it's up today, it's down today, I took some profits, look at the options, all of those things. So it's not like I try and move away from those people. So, and then, have in the vehicle that I run, we encourage our investors to, they get a better deal in terms of the fees that they pay if they go into a share class that doesn't allow them. So set up the investment relationship where they can't put their hands on the money on a daily basis. In fact, we have a share class where you can only put your hands on the money every 15 years. So it's kind of saying, look, we really want to know that you're with us for a long time, and we'll charge you next to nothing.
Right. So
having said that, those are all great, not terrible things to do, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
And this is where it pisses me off, because Warren, every lesson I learn, Warren already knows, and so the ultimate is to be in Warren's shoes, where you just have a sort of like and it doesn't matter how big you have a pipe of cash that's flowing in every year or every quarter,
month, yeah.
And in a way, and I'm certain that Warren would agree with me, the size of the pipe is less important than the consistency of the pipe.
Yeah.
And so what enables Warren, and look, it's just the nature of the world that you and I inhabit, despite everything that I've said, that, my cash in and outflows are highly dependent on sentiment in the market. And much as I would like my investors not to be affected by sentiment in the market, they are. So my cash inflows and outflows are correlated to sentiment, and I hate it, but it is the way it is.
That's the world we live in.
Yeah, and so I'm constantly trying to figure out how can I move to a different kind of a world. By contrast, in Warren's insurance business, what's amazing is insurance is quite possibly in many circumstances counter-cyclical. So in a world where risk goes up or perception of risk goes up, people are suddenly hyper-focused on the possibility of planes flying into buildings.
Right.
They all want to buy insurance. And so you potentially have cash inflows at exactly the right time rather than cash outflows. And whether it's through the insurance business or through wholly owned businesses that provide a funnel of cash, that's one of the things that enables. So what's my point to you? And is that a lot of this is psychology, but but building the circumstances of your environment. And what I would say is people say, oh yeah, how cool, you went to Zurich, so it's all calm. And the answer is, yeah, it's all calm in Zurich, but it's not going to stop sentiment in the market affecting my investors who suddenly want to pull their money. Because my being in Zurich doesn't impact that at all.
Right.
You need, longer share classes helps, but the really good way to do it is to kind of like have the vehicle that utterly seals that up in a way.
Yeah.
So that's that's for me a kind of a holy grail that you were so kind. I mean, you said yesterday, well, you're on the path to that. And I genuinely, I mean, if I get to that in my lifetime, I'll be really grateful, but I'm not sure that I will. I mean, and I look at people who are extraordinarily talented, like Bill Ackman, and he understands this far better than I do, I'm sure. And he's got vehicles like Pershing, the publicly traded vehicle, but somehow it's not Berkshire, Tom Gaynor has it at Markel.
It's it's such a specific thing. It's so hard to replicate. I mean, like you said yesterday, we're talking about Buffett, and you're like, he put the blueprint out there. Why haven't more people done it?
It's really hard.
It's really hard, and I wonder, as we look to this transition to like AI and everybody's, the information overload. I think about the noise, just going back to noise and how much data is out there and how many calls to action. Will AI help that? Will it hurt it? Well, I mean, it's like most things. It's going to be a double-edged sword. It'll have good things. Now, those kind of things. I mean, I used it last quarter to go through, hedge fund reports and like, hey, go through all the reports, tell me who raised their cash 10%, who raised their cash 20%. And literally in 10 seconds, it told me all the funds that had raised cash.
Wow.
So from a research standpoint, it really, helped me out. And then I was like, ooh, is this accurate? Because now I'm like, I don't want to be making, so I was a little cautious. So I actually went through and looked and then there were some points where it was unhelpful because I was like, well, tell me what were the most traded stocks what were the most traded stocks with buy orders for hedge funds over the last quarter? And it was Apple, Amazon, NVIDIA. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what the biggest sells were. Okay, it's Apple, Amazon, NVIDIA. It's all the same. They end up being the same, but I'm just trying to figure out how to use that. And then what businesses is AI not gonna impact?
Yeah.
Right. So this is the Charlie Munger, invert, always invert.
It's a beautiful question.
And thinking about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett talking about, Bill Gates is like, Warren, man, the computer's going to change the world. And he's like, well, how's it going to change how people chew gum?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, what are you talking about? But I think about that. Like, what businesses is it not really going to impact? And then also, what businesses are going to have to spend a ton of money to have AI, but they're gonna absorb the cost and they're not going to be able to pass it through to the customer. So that I think is like the key over the next 3 to 5 years.
And it may be that these kind of like Google, Apple, Meta and co, they're going to become like department stores where they just have to spend enormous amounts increasing their AI.
Yeah.
And it's not going to help at all. Whereas if you run a dialysis company, if you're giving people dialysis, or if you're giving people massages, or if you're giving anything that's got a real human element to it, then those companies are going to end up doing much better, because there's just no amount of AI that can help those people do better dialysis. I mean, at the end of the day, you need to go into the dialysis center or do home dialysis, whatever it is,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, also interesting for me, I mean, I talked about Bloomberg, but, so I have Bloomberg, which a monitor costs $25,000 a year. And then I have been using a lot of Perplexity, which is grown by leaps and bounds. And I use Perplexity for investment research as much as I use Bloomberg. And Perplexity costs me $20 a month. And Perplexity is reading everything all the time.
Yeah.
And so, and it's fascinating. And you're coming up, I mean, something that came up in a conversation recently is that you need to get good at forming the right question. And if you form the wrong question for the AI, you're going to get not great results.
Yeah, that is the key. And that was my worry when I typed, I'm like, did I ask it right? Did it give me the right prompt back? Did I need to check this. I mean, spending the time to see, like, is it accurate?
So what I loved, what made me adopt Perplexity, and I'm probably talking, there are people listening to this who know way more about it than I do, is that asking ChatGPT questions, and I don't know where it's getting it from, and I don't trust the answers, but Perplexity, at least for most of the time I've used it, I understand they now got copyright issues that are coming up, but it would give me sources. So I'd ask it a question, and it would give me the sources for where it drew the answers from.
Yeah.
So then I can go and read the sources, and it gives me the top 10 sources. I think Google doesn't like it very much, because now it's bypassing Google. Google doesn't get to show any ads. So I really like that, but I mean, you've been asking questions of AI that I haven't even thought about. Like, tell me funds that have outperformed, that have now established new positions in something. So we go look and see why they've bought what they've bought, for example. Yeah, I mean, I at the end of the day, AI has come up so fast, and it seems to be improving so fast, that I just admit lack of knowledge and helplessness in a way. I hope that my role gets to survive. I'm going to do my best.
Yeah.
But I don't claim any special knowledge, and I don't claim any special insight about how the world will unfold.
Yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you. That's why I was trying to think. I think sometimes I think about, just going back to the original thought, is like everybody's over here competing on how is AI going to, change all these businesses. And that's why I'm like, well, which ones is it not going to change? I'm trying to go for the easier fruit. I'm trying to go for the easier, like, who's it not going to impact? And I think that those kind of question prompts just in your head can make you think, like, going back, we talked about Coca-Cola. It's not really going to impact how people drink Coca-Cola. Maybe they'll drink more because they'll be sitting in front of the computer asking, all these questions.
Yeah.
So just things like that, where maybe Coca-Cola can use it to make their internal business more efficient, more profitable. But as far as like the end consumer, it shouldn't have much of an impact as far as changing people's habits. I always think about habits.
Yeah.
Like, how do people's, for me, that was a big deal. Like during COVID, I thought about like Amazon, and I thought about there was a whole generation of consumers that normally did not shop on Amazon, older consumers, that COVID changed their habits.
Yeah.
And they realized how easy it was to order on Amazon. So they got this whole customer base that they probably would have spent billions upon billions of dollars trying to attract. COVID made it happen for them. Accelerated it overnight. But those habits are sticky. When people change their habits, it's very difficult for people to then go back, the other way. They stay.
And who would have thought? I mean, that was, amongst many painful moments and investments that I've missed, and I can tell the painful story about me and Amazon. But so I say laptops and Windows, and people are like, Microsoft Windows, and I say, today it's Microsoft, tomorrow it's somebody else. The technology, the way it's delivered, is not that important. It's an Intel chip or somebody else's chip.
Right.
And Amazon, they were aggregating a whole bunch of suppliers and presenting a web page. And you say, but somebody else could present the web page. But then somehow through the aggregation and also the distribution centers, because it turned out that timeliness of delivery was important. So there's a whole logistical system behind it that is actually very, very hard to replicate. And that actually seems to have an extraordinary and lasting value. But I come back every time to the place which feels, and I can argue for why it's safe, is that when you get to the place where there's nothing that gets in between you and the consumer. For example, you chose chewing gum. It's like, and they like the brand and they reach for the brand that they're familiar with, or Count Lines, the chocolates that you put on there in all these kind of convenience stores. We talked about dialysis. I mean, there are plenty of places where it's very, very hard to get in between the product that was already being delivered to the consumer and what the consumer wants. And so those are probably the places to focus on.
Yeah. And that convenience factor, you talked about Amazon, but the convenience of getting your package delivered. It's interesting. It's the path of least resistance.
Something that I don't know why it comes up for me. Actually, when I come visit you in Texas, there's a company, and I'm just going to say their name. I probably shouldn't, but so I did a screen. One of the screens that I love just looks for companies that have succeeded in growing their sales while at the same time reducing their share count. And
that's a good one.
Yeah, and because it's very hard to manipulate revenues per share, and it's very hard to if a company genuinely reduces its share count over a period of years, that's not very easy to do. And maybe I won't mention the company anyway. Because it might be really good, and I haven't done. But they manufacture right near to where you are, somewhere in Texas. So it's like because it might end up being a really good investment idea. We can talk about it offline.
All right, yeah, ultimate cliffhanger.
Yeah, but then the question is, the product that they manufacture is not like Wrigley's gum. The preference might be that product today, but it might be another product in the future, and the willingness to stay with that product is many, many different factors that go into it, but you can't be sure that the consumer will stay with it.
Yeah, well, you brought up Intel, and today, it's a historic day. Intel got booted from the Dow today, and NVIDIA got put in.
But wow,
that happened today.
How painful is Intel down? Not that we're checking stock prices on a daily basis, but
I don't know how much it's down today, but it's been a really bad couple of years for them. When they cut their dividend, that was really.
But so Intel is technology, but think of this. A company that has come up for me in the past that I don't know that well, but Arctic Cat, they make snowmobiles.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it's a really powerful brand, highly profitable business. But why do you buy Arctic Cat? Anybody who Honda could make something like that, or another one that was really, really eye opening for me. So I used to ride motorcycles, and I owned a Harley Davidson for a short while, and I was big into BMW motorcycles, and so now it's the financial crisis, and Berkshire Hathaway makes a loan to Harley Davidson. And at the Berkshire meeting, I can't remember the exact question, but it comes clear to me that Warren was fine making the loan, a high yield loan to Harley Davidson, but they wouldn't have bought the shares.
Right.
And Warren said, who knows whether the brand is something to the effect of, who knows whether the brand is around in 100 years. And I'm thinking to myself, these damn buyers to Harley Davidson into their skin, and you're wondering whether it weren't going to be around. Actually, Harley Davidson is having a really hard time appealing to a new generation. So people my age all know Harley,
right?
But in order to grow and to be relevant, they need to appeal to people in their 20s. And are they appealing to people in their 20s? Not obvious. So this sort of technology can be booted out. That we could stop riding the wave is one thing, but a powerful brand like Harley Davidson, and I don't think many people would say it's a powerful brand, but I think that people don't realize when I try to talk to them about brands and about consumer preferences and unchanging consumer preferences, they'll bring all sorts of products in there and assume that they're all the same. And it's actually a narrow subset of consumer brands that actually have that incredible sticking power.
Correct. Yeah.
I think that, and Warren Buffett nails them all. Coca-Cola is one of them.
Yeah.
I think that, Budweiser is another. And Harley Davidson, the jury's out, So.
Well, and it's, That's one of the reasons why, like, I personally don't like apparel companies. Like, I don't have a good fashion sense, or I don't.
Right.
But
you look fine.
But it just, yeah, thank you. But it just changes. Like every generation wants like their clothes or their, they want their style. It's about a 5-year switch over, and how am I supposed to know what's, going to be? I just find those, like, I put those in the too difficult to figure out. Plus, it's just a highly competitive business. I mean, the profit margins are razor thin on, when you're competing. It's just too difficult for me.
But I'll have fun with that. So apparel, absolutely. But then there are some. So Abercrombie and Fitch just came up in conversation. It turns out that there was some kind of sexual abuse going on in that company. And the time when I was living in Manhattan, some investors I respected very, very highly owned shares in Abercrombie and Fitch. I remember on Fifth Avenue walking into their store, and it was a special environment of the armies of teens waiting to buy their clothes. And now it's kind of like an also ran. So Joel Greenblatt's, a family member of his, who's a very smart investor, specialized in retail and those kinds of consumer brands, which is kind of fascinating.
Right.
But then, and I'm not sure that, so then you move into, or I would argue you can move into a space called luxury, which has apparel in it. But actually, I think that those brands are extraordinarily sustainable over multiple generations. So a brand that is kind of on the border, I think so you can talk about luxury and you can talk about premium. I think that Polo Ralph Lauren is actually premium rather than luxury.
Right.
And luxury examples, LVMH or Dior. There's a book by a guy called Don Thompson called The Curious Economics of Luxury Fashion, if I'm not mistaken. And he explains how the economics of the luxury sector are very, very different. And so
it's a great point.
And so what's fascinating, and this is like Charlie Munger said, in the investing world, it's constantly churning and changing. So I think that you're absolutely right. We're absolutely right. The vast majority of apparel is very, very hard to predict. But then there are some luxury brands which are also in apparel, which may be very, very easy to predict.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to. I wouldn't. If you own a conglomerate where you own the brand Ralph Lauren and you also own the brand LVMH, would you be as confident investing in the LVMH brand as you would in the Ralph Lauren brand? And there's another example. Sorry, I'm going on a little of it, but there's so much fun to talk about because I've thought about it, as you can see, quite a bit. So I can remember there's a guy at Sanford Bernstein called Luca Solca. He's like a genius, who's an analyst for luxury brands. And Coach. Coach is a very well-known American brand. And I think it was who said, Coach will never make the transition from... And in fact, there are luxury analysts who say that in order to be a true luxury brand, you kind of have to have European heritage. And Coach is an American brand. But then LVMH goes and buys Tiffany's, and Tiffany's is an American brand, and you come with that argument of like, but it's an American brand. You're never going to be able to convert it in luxury. It's premium. It's not luxury. And every piece of evidence that I've seen tells me that LVMH, by investing enormous amounts of money, are going to earn a high return on their invested capital in converting Tiffany's from premium to luxury. And I urge anybody listening to this or watching this to go visit their store in Manhattan to go check it out. What's my point? Whenever you come with these generalizations, there'll be kind of wrinkles,
Well, it's Lulu, the yoga, all the yoga pants. I mean, that's another apparel, but I mean, but there's some that are just so difficult.
Lululemon is so interesting. There's a friend in Zurich who used to have a podcast. She doesn't do it anymore, and she loved talking about Lululemon. And it seems that if you're a certain kind of female investor, probably Lululemon's a really, really fun company to own. And it may be, when you look at this behavioral side and the psychological side, even though you and I would feel very uncomfortable owning an apparel brand for our long-term investing, it might be the right way for a certain kind of woman to step into investing, despite all of the disadvantages.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's like when you're talking about somebody starting investing, I mean, you want them to pick something that they have a personal interest in, because otherwise they won't have anything to relate it to. At least they'll start looking at it, tracking it. I mean, you want it to be something that, like, if you were to start investing with like a 10-year-old kid, you'd say, hey, what are the things that are in this person's world? Like, what's going to be the thing that's going to spark that interest, you know?
So my daughter, she wanted a school bag, and she'd identified, I don't know if it's luxury or premium. So we went and got her a Longchamp bag, which is like wonderful, durable bags. And they kind of make the person who carries it feel pretty good without being, maybe like an equivalent to the Swatch brand.
Yeah.
It's not hyper expensive, but it's not like a Birkin bag. So anyway, and then I decided that was kind of fun. So we're planning a trip to Milan, and she's very excited to visit various luxury brands. It turns out that she wanted to visit, like, she was 16 years old. She wanted brands I've never heard of, where I visit her in the store. So I sit and have my coffees.
Right.
She's going to these stores. She says, she texts me and she says, meet me at XYZ store. I walk into the store, a brand I've never heard of. And every person in there looks just like my daughter. They're 16-year-old girls buying anyway. And like, but before we went on that trip, because I thought she was going to drag me through LVMH, Dior, all of those, I said, that's fine, but I've created Charles Schwab accounts for each of my 3 children. I said, but we're going to buy you shares of LVMH, and that she's got shares of Hermes. And I said, you need to understand that there are smart business people who making, I think the technical expression is, shit tons of money out of you and people like you. And I never ever want you to think just as a consumer. I want you to go into those stores and understand there's a game that's being played, and there's capitalists on the other side who performing money extraction operations of people like us.
That's exactly right.
And I hope the lesson went in.
Well, but it's like, so going back to your Abercrombie in the early days, like, you talk about consumer behavior and just marketing behavior, where they would have the music turned up way loud. The lighting would be so dark.
You talk about Abercrombie.
Abercrombie. So you got this loud music, the lighting, the lighting's dim, and they have like just a spotlight on pairs of jeans. Same thing happens. Daughter, teenage, goes in there and says, hey, Dad, I got these pants I want to buy. The parent comes in there. They got the music blaring. They can't see because their eyes are trying to adjust, and they're just like, here's my credit card. Like, I just want out of this store as fast as possible. They're just trying to get the parents to make that quick decision. Like, I just want out of this environment,
But in those stores, what I remember in Manhattan was that you had these, mainly males. Yeah. You had like these scantily dressed, very, very attractive looking males, which probably got the female hormones pumping, and then they're like desperate to dress like them or dress in a way that would make them appealing to those males. There's a whole kind of thing that's going on in the store, a psychological thing, which, by the way, is what happens at the luxury stores. You can tell a luxury store because there'll be somebody at the door who lets you in.
Right.
You're always going to be greeted at the door, and you walk in, and there's this feeling like, well, what are you doing here? And like, are you going to show your stuff and buy something, or are you just going to be one of these creepy people who look? So they've already created a psychology around that, and Abercrombie were doing that.
It's the, are we going to let you in? It's the scarcity. Are you part of this club, or are you just outside looking in?
So I don't mind mentioning this company, and please let's go and do some research on it, because I think it's just an apparel brand, but it might be more, and it's this company, Guess Jeans. And they have, I think they have a very powerful brand, and it's a beauty sales. And they take a particular version of beauty, and they get these brand ambassadors, and hey, it works. And they'll sell, I don't know how many jeans a year. Very cheap right now.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that probably it's a pass, but it's a don't understand, will never understand.
Right.
But it's interesting. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I think, you have to look. And a lot of these brands, like we talked about, where they go, man, we've spent a lot of time on apparel that I didn't think we'd spend.
No, exactly. But that's fine.
But they go through, they're cool for one generation.
Yeah.
The next generation picks something else because they want to wear something that was different than their brother or sister. They want their own brand. And they do a really good job of finding the right time to recycle them where
Yeah.
they come back, with a vengeance, if you will, when everybody kind of left them for dead.
And so, and it's something even within the luxury world that I've been trying to understand more of, there was a turnaround of Gucci in that kind of way, where they succeeded, and it's, if I'm not mistaken, Kering that owns Gucci, they succeeded in making the brand relevant again to a new generation. So it looked like it was a has-been and also ran older generation, and they rejuvenated it. Having said that, I used to spend a lot of time thinking and looking at a German company called Etienne Egner. Etienne Egner was a luxury brand, and I think it hit the graveyard. So I would not be able to tell whether a Gucci is going to turn into an Etienne Egner, or whether it's going to be rejuvenated in that way. And I spent more time than any looking at the LVMH stable of brands, and LVMH has so many companies and old brands in their portfolio. And I think that part of what makes that such an interesting company is that there's a huge stable of, in a way, also round brands that can be rejuvenated at the right moment with the right person. So they've got this kind of catalog of stuff that can be taken out at the right moment. Right. And they have the brands that are running doing research into luxury brands is so much fun, because you're kind of walking around a tiny parts of town. So there's a store so LVMH is also a real estate play, because luxury brands have to be sold in certain parts of town. Yeah. And so LVMH knows how to develop parts of town. So there's a place in Paris, a store which was called La Samaritaine, a building that they went and renovated for an insane amount of money.
Right.
And it's become a powerhouse retail center. And there's a whole part of the ground floor that is dedicated to this La Veuve Clicquot, a brand of champagne. And they're pumping that right now.
Yeah.
But there are 1,000 other brands that they could pump in the future.
Right.
It just seems to be working for them right now.
Yeah.
So they push it.
Yeah, and the best brands in the world are good at that. It's like Nike taking designs that they made in 1988 and saying, "Hey, here's the retro version of the shoe."
That famous basketball shoe.
Yeah,
but I know how long you want to talk about. So what woke me up, and so I don't know why my wife wanted a suitcase, so we went to the store in Zurich that has different brands of suitcases. I think it was Jelmoli. And she was interested in these kind of metal suitcases. And there's some very Samsonite metal, very nice. Then we go to Globus, and there's a specific Rimowa store. Rimowa was acquired by LVMH. And there I see a photograph of Lewis Hamilton with the Rimowa suitcase. And that one is functionally equivalent to the Samsonite one. Right. 3 times the price. But the Samsonite one, as I tell you the story, I just say, I'm Samsonite in metal. But now I go into the Rimowa one, and I say, metal and Lewis Hamilton, Formula One, ladies, going to Ferrari, all of those things. And it was amazing to me, because I realized that they were taking a stupid piece of metal luggage and turning it into a cultural idea, and also promoting Lewis Hamilton. So Lewis Hamilton is looking to beyond his Formula One career. Correct. What is he going to be doing? And does he like the fact that he's going to be plastered all over the place, his image? And it's nothing wrong with being associated with the luggage. I mean, it's high quality luggage, those things. And I realized how they are promoting cultural icons. They're taking people like Hamilton and making their career even better. Well, they're doing that now with both Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. Yeah. And you don't even know what products they're going to be promoting. They're just like...
Yeah. But this is like a great thing to point out is I think so many finance people, the people that are going to be watching this, listening to this, they spend so much time on all the quantitative data. And this whole conversation we've had is like qualitative stuff, like the emotional side, the habits of people, the perception of a brand. All of those things that also factor into the value of a business that isn't so easy for somebody to like pinpoint when you think about just the number side of a balance sheet, so to speak. Yeah. Whereas, and I think that is what a lot of investors, they do a great job on all the balance sheet, cash flows, all of that. But I think sometimes they underestimate the brand, the habits of people, the perceptions of people, all of these things that you just can't quite, put a number to.
I mean, the business, look, the balance, who was I talking to recently? Where was it? Yes. So I was in St. Louis, an investment conference called Tulipomania. Wonderful, wonderful investment conference. And there was a conversation so there was a guy there who's an amazing bank analyst there.
Mm-hmm.
We're outside of.
Yeah.
And if you've got a high enough rating in the banking world, you can manipulate what your balance sheet looks like, especially for short periods of time. So you can, just before the end of the quarter, go and buy a bunch of short-term instruments that mature a day or two later that make your balance sheet look very, very different. And they're immature, and then the balance sheet goes back to what it was. And so it turns out that before 2008, there were huge manipulations going on this, where the balance sheets were far more leveraged. But just before the end of every quarter, they would engage in a bunch of transactions to artificially bring the leverage down.
Wow.
And
yeah.
I'm not sure I can in real time explain it, but somebody wants to get back to me, we can look at it together and sort of verify exactly what they did. So the balance sheet is just a snapshot in time. The company itself, look, we have in the accounting world, we have conversations about what accounting standard to apply. Often the accounting world allows you to apply different standards.
Correct.
The accounts are the map, not the territory. And so they are a representation of what's happened in the business.
Yeah.
But they're not the business.
Correct.
And so the accounts are the map, not the territory. And actually, how do we discover the territory? The territory is vast and complex, and accounting is a really good way to get a kind of a sense of what's going on. And then we have to do in a way what the accountants do, and they say it in the most important part of the accounts is the introductory letter, where they say we evaluated on a test basis, but often they'll tell you the kinds of things that they did, so you get a sense of whether things are skewed in one way or another. And all we can do is collect evidence in various different ways, which is inevitably not going to be the complete picture. So we develop so the accounts are not the territory, they're just a map. We go and do investment research, channel checks, talk to people, anecdotes, and that's not the territory either. So we just get a sense of what might be going on. And what we have to do, and Bayesian probability, given what I know about the world, given what the base rates are in the world, what is the significance of this piece of data coming in? Do I discount it, or is it significant? And that is a subtle evaluation. And I don't think people realize it's not about, obviously you want to understand the three different accounting statements. You want to understand all the way the notes get written. But then I think that where you're really getting somewhere is where you're getting a sense of whether this company is understating or overstating. Is the orientation of the group of people who put together these accounts to hide all the good stuff that they've got, or to use all the accounting rules in to show as little as possible? Or are they trying to show, or are they under pressure to show as lot as possible? A portfolio company of mine, Nestle, under not easy. The previous CEO, Mark Schneider, been there for 6 or 7 years, but now they're going through a period where revenue growth is disappointing the market. I can imagine that, and I have no idea what happened, and I haven't done that kind of forensic evaluation.
Right.
That at least some members of the management team would have been under pressure to try and show things a little better than they were.
Right.
And literally, saying 4% real internal growth keeps you your job, showing 2% real internal growth loses you your job.
Right.
And none of the board of Nestle would want to own up to that, but that probably was the case. So, what's my point? The manipulation to show more than you have doesn't necessarily come out of a desire to be fraudulent or dishonest. It's just that there's a natural pressure that comes up.
It's a human instinct of,
as changed circumstances arise. So it's really, I don't know. I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
How much time, assume an intelligent layperson who's capable of learning all the accounting concepts that they need to learn. At what point in your accounting journey do you flip from being somebody who's trying to understand the accounts to being somebody who can say, it's not about understanding, it's about which direction are they skewed? What kind of people produced these accounts? What were the pressures they were under? Is this something where I'm going to get nasty negative surprises, or am I going to get very positive surprises?
Yeah. I think that journey is going to be different for everybody. And, how much time do people spend? I mean, if you take an intro to, accounting or whatever, you're just barely able to understand the definitions and all that. I mean, it just takes a matter of time. My truthful answer to this is that you get burned and you lose a lot of money on an investment.
And then you start
and then it gets branded into your head. This is me. This is Lynn Energy. I'm looking right at you. My worst investment I ever made. But you have a very painful moment where you lose a lot of money, and you have to reverse engineer and say, what did I do wrong? Like, what did I not see? Like, what was there that I did not see?
Yeah.
And
and then suddenly the accounts are completely different.
Yeah, and then you sit there, but you have to, as an investor, if you want to get better, you have to be. Everybody always wants to talk about their stocks that were great, and I always want to ask people, like, what was the worst investment you ever made? Because those are the ones nobody goes into an investment and goes, man, I hope I really lose a lot of money on this one. I mean, the expectation is you're making the investment because you expect to make money. So when it goes against what you thought was going to happen, I mean, that's where real learning takes place.
Yeah.
Is like, where did I mess up? Like, what did I not see?
So while we're talking about accounting, and we flipped from branded to accounting, so it's all good. And we spend a little time banking there, but and because you, as somebody who's not met Ryan before, I think that I'm very much looking forward at the right moment sitting in one of your classes and observing you, because I got the sense that you're a really good educator, really, really good. I mean, you teach people stuff that they wouldn't learn otherwise. And so I have a question for you about accounting that has puzzled me, and maybe you know the answer, is that, so I was good at mathematics, and that was a subject I was good at, matrices, differential equations, calculus. Right. I mean, I didn't take maths anywhere near as far as I would have liked to, but I could get my brain around maths. So now I'm at business school, and we do accounting. And I mean, let's face it, it's sometimes you have to multiply and divide, but most of the time you're adding and subtracting.
Correct.
That's about it.
Right.
And so that there's just arithmetic, really, that you're doing. You're not doing calculus.
Right.
You're not doing matrices. You're not doing all sorts of really hard things to understand. But despite the mathematics being so simple, I think that I really started to get a sense of how it took me a long while of working with that stuff to start to get a sense of how the numbers move, and how the income statement affects the equity part of the balance sheet, how the cash flow differs from the income statement, how different versions of accrual is going to affect, and why when the concepts, the mathematics is so simple, does it take so long to really learn that? And I actually think that I got the bare minimum. If I would have worked in an audit firm,
right,
CPA,
correct,
I would have been way better.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it take so long?
I think because every business is different, so when you look at, like, if it's an oil and gas company versus a technology company versus, like, I used to, I'm the weird question to ask you, but how did you learn how to read, like, balance sheets and stuff, things like that? Like, I would, for me, what I would do is I would take, like, who I thought was the best business in their industry, and I would look at their numbers. It's a very tedious process, by the way. I would look at their numbers, and then I would compare other people that competed against them to basically figure out a way to compare, like, why is this company doing so much better than the others? And that was really the only way I could figure out how to do it, was to take who was, like, the industry leader at that moment and compare people to them. Yeah. And that was really the only way I could figure out to really start to learn what made a company different from another.
So you're taking companies in the same industry, in the same business, and you're looking at their accounts, and then you're seeing why the account's different.
Right.
For example, you see that one company has negative working capital, someone has positive. It's like, wow, that's a big difference. I'd say for me, so I remember, and I was really arrogant going into business school, and then I think there was something where they said, before you arrive, you need to read this book. It was a very, very basic book on accounting where, in each chapter is a lemonade stand, and they built you up a little sort of business with a balance sheet, income statement, and they sort of explained how what you built up on yourself using T accounts and double entry bookkeeping. And that was really just a revelation to me. I was like, oh my God, this is so fucking cool. I'm blown away. So it started off with that accounting course or the pre-business school accounting book that I had to read. And then, I did a couple of accounting courses. One was a Professor Richard Nolan, amazing professor. And you might know him, actually, because he was a different generation, I guess. And I actually did, for a short while, I didn't finish the course. I did tax factors in accounting. So then you've got the interaction between the management accounts and your tax accounts, which, again, teaches you a lot about accruals and a whole bunch of stuff. And so I guess, it was through doing different case studies at business school that I think I got up a long learning curve. I think that's something, and again, you tell me, something that's slightly frustrating about the new world of winner takes all. Right. Is, I can forgive myself a little bit for Amazon, for example, because they were able to do things that were just impossible to understand. Yeah. At least not, and unless if you were just reading the accounts, maybe if I would have been spending time with Jeff Bezos, if I would have been really listening to the.
Well, yeah, in the early years, if you didn't work for Amazon, I mean, the first 10 years where, you didn't know if they were going to go out of business. I mean, it's one of those, like, nobody, unless you worked there, you knew him, it would have, I don't know how you would have backed up like that you wanted to make that investment, but.
And here's the point is that, So Amazon appeared to be a highly unprofitable company, spending vast amounts of money. And I looked at it and just went, they're unprofitable company spending vast amounts of money. And I remember writing to a friend, Amazon may be the first company in the history of capitalism to have gone through this incredible market cap and to have never actually made money for investors, because the owner is so insanely dedicating to delivering a good deal that he's going to underprice everything forever all the time, and there will be no actual cash return to investors. Of course, that was utterly wrong. But so I don't know if Jeff Bezos knew, or he just had a hunch, or he's willing to take the massive bet that these investments would pay
off at some point.
And let's just remember that for every Amazon, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of companies and an investor group around them and a management team who are doing what they think is the same thing. And they're spending enormous amounts of money in the expectation that this will turn into a profitable business. Or there are companies like in the chip industry that every 5 years they have to bet the whole company. And you're never sure if they're going to get through to the next cycle of chips.
I think about that with Intel. I think about the reverse of that, where like investor pressure of, hey, you need to pay us a dividend. You need to start rewarding shareholders, right? So Intel does this dividend, which prevents them from doing as much research and development. And then all of a sudden, because they're giving, maybe they're using capital to return to shareholders, you had NVIDIA over here that's doing all the research and development, and they fly past them, and it's like, wait, what just happened? They didn't even see them; they just heard them.
And then it was already too late,
and it's over.
And that's a problem with So in running screens, I'm trying to find screens where you're measuring numbers that are not easily manipulatable by the management. So if you talk about EBITDA numbers or those are all. And manipulation is not fair. They get skewed for understandable reasons in one direction or another. Right. How much signal is there? How much noise? So share count is not easily manipulated. Sales is not easily manipulated. But then, if I'm doing a screen for companies that have reduced their share count, I mean, I think that for me, a company that has a rapidly increasing share count is utterly disgusting to me. I hate that. The max that I'm willing to go is a company that's increasing its share count by 2-3% every year, which was already a little disgusting to me. And, but you talked about Intel maybe should have spent more money on R&D and going for BHAG projects than returning money to shareholders. And I'm sort of saying, but how do I screen for that?
Right.
And that it's really hard because you just, and it's worth saying that imagine we're, a 2-person board of Intel, and you come along and say, hey, listen, guy, I think we should cut the dividend and just reinvest in. And then there's like 20 different investment research projects, research, R&D within Intel, and all the organizations are totally sort of like useless at spending the money correctly. And what we actually know, then even if I were to agree with you in our hypothetical 2-member board, is it going to go into the skunk works that will actually create the next NVIDIA chip, or is it going to be in these 3 organizations that are, IBM spends vast amounts?
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that's true. Well, and plus we could talk about, like, is it because one's founder led and they have the ultimate, like, what I say goes, and they don't have to deal, the founder led version versus, a much older company where, maybe it becomes a lot more bureaucratic and, you don't have that entrepreneurship mindset.
Yeah.
Of like Amazon, it's always day one or whatever they, that they say to try to keep that entrepreneurial that drive alive.
So I'll give you something else in building up my little business, which comes up for me, which is fun. So Ryan, you're worried you didn't have the right questions. You can see every conversation is different. So I've never said this before, and it's fun to say it, and I'm curious to see where you come up, how it develops. So we talked about compounding. So I realized, as I'm getting a little better known, that people are sending me investment ideas. And I think this is great. I need, it may be that a good investment idea can come from anywhere.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what people send me. So I do another version of compounding, which I change my process, that somebody sends me a good investment idea, or even I give them some kind of reward. I write a thank you note. I engage with them back. If it's a really well-written investment idea, I invite them to my Value X conference, like all sorts of different things to kind of encourage that. And it's just like quiet ways. So now I have a steady stream of really interesting ideas, and I really, really appreciate them. That process started maybe 5 years ago. Now I realize that there's a bias. Because, and this bias exists in Value Investors Club, by the way, which is that there are investment ideas which write themselves up well, and where the person who has it is motivated to write it up, either because it's easy to write up and or because it reflects on them in a good light. But there's a whole class of investment ideas that are less likely to get written up and are even better. And actually, in the same way that if I was effectively scouting for venture capital deals on the East Coast, I knew that if a deal had come from you for the West Coast, the probability that it was a good deal was extraordinarily low because it had failed all the local.
Right. It's gone through everybody already.
So you know that you're kind of like, it's very, not 100% likely to be a dud, but far more likely to be a dud. So, if an investment idea is getting written up, what does that say about the idea? The guy writing it up, did he already buy shares? Is it not worth buying shares, but it tells a good story?
It's a very humble thing to ask yourself. Like, like we talk about that, I'm from West Texas, so it's the oil and gas field. But like, if somebody's coming to you with an oil deal, like it's probably terrible because it would have already been invested in by 35 other people or whatever. Like why is it on how did this end up on my desk?
And even further, if it ended up in your desk, if an oil and gas deal ends up on my desk, let's talk about me, because I think you're quite close to the oil and gas industry. Yeah. It's an idea that is any insider didn't want to invest in, but it's still a good enough story that it stayed alive on account of the story, not on account of the quality of the actual investment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's I think about this with like investment tips. Like, I mean, we're getting into social media and people are going to watch this on social media, but everybody's got a system. I had a potential client come to me one time and said, hey, can you double my money every month? And I said, hey, if I could double money every month, I would just double my money every month and I wouldn't be here.
They've stopped doing it. I've had more than one. The guy who sort of writes to me and says, I've earned, I'm on 35% annualized. Mm-hmm. Would you like me to come work for you as an analyst? The words back is, congratulations, at 35% annualized, any amount of money. And I did the calculation, any amount of money that you've invested has turned into vast amounts, and you certainly don't need to come to work for me as an analyst, and wishing you the very best.
Right.
So I guess people have to try it. But so what I'm not sure I've figured it out yet is I love to read stuff. I want to receive stuff, and I'm grateful to the people who send it to me, and I seek to reward them for sending me stuff. But there's another layer of identifying the best possible ideas, which I think ultimately comes down to conversations with people.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, my own conference, Value X, is not the best place for me, because you need this kind of conversation.
Right.
The ideas and it's not the one that the guys so at Value X, people present ideas, investment ideas worth sharing. But it's the idea that the guy shares at the bar afterwards. So everybody's always asking for more bar time.
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't know why that is, and that actually puts me at I think probably a disadvantage, because I don't want to hang out in a bar. I want to read stuff, and I kind of like not interested in bars.
Right.
But that's where, and I don't know, maybe asking this question, maybe asking you, I wonder, I think having broad conversations with all sorts of people is also
well.
good.
That's what you've done well. Like I told you yesterday, like you're a super connector, right? Like so you connect with so many people. So many people kind of pass through your world, so to speak. And so as that world gets bigger, it gets harder, and then it's where do those good ideas come from? But I think you've done a great job of like Value X. And you're putting, you're creating the rooms for those conversations to be had.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise, those conversations wouldn't be had, because I think that, we need to mention it, but at some point, obviously Warren Buffett is going to pass away.
Yeah.
And the Berkshire Hathaway meeting is not going to be the same. It's not going to be, I mean, like, sorry, the spoiler alert, but it won't be. I'm not saying like that the aura will kind of dissipate. I don't think you'll have the number of people that'll go there. I think that, but the want from those investors will be there, and they'll want to go to something. And you have done a great job of creating value. I think that could be an issue. Is there's going to be a lot of people who are going to want to go to that conference.
So I think I mean, I now feel a little bit of the sadness that you just expressed, because one day Warren won't be around, and I think that the meeting won't die down as quickly as many people think, because people like me and many others will come back.
Sure,
there'll be all sorts of other good things going on there.
Yeah.
So, but you can say that 50 years after Warren Buffett's demise, maybe the meeting will be quite small. I don't look forward to Warren's demise, but I actually look forward when Berkshire introduced the B class, there was inflow of new shareholders, and many of those shareholders didn't know why they were there, and kind of like were a bit annoying for those of us who knew why we were there. And so, if it thins out the crowd a little bit, that won't bother me all that much. And another thing that I would say that, I mean, I learned, I think primarily through Monish is this kind of connecting type stuff and processes and systems for becoming a connector, because we had a conversation yesterday about whether, who's a greater introvert and who's a greater extrovert. And I'm not into cocktail parties and glad handing and shaking hands and being in bars. So if you, and the good news is that if you're somebody like me and you still want to be a connector and a networker, there are ways to do it where you don't have to go to bars, but it creates a lot of noise. And so in combination with kind of putting on conferences like the one you were in at Berkshire Hathaway, that noise needs to be somehow managed so that you get the good stuff through. And I can say that I've been through iterations where something that I've done, like writing my book, created a lot of noise. Doing these podcasts in a way creates a lot of noise. There's a proportion of the noise is really signal, I guess you'd call it. But finding the right ways to filter that signal from the noise it's a changing challenge as my presence in the world evolves. I need to do different things and I need to update.
How do you manage the expectations as things have gotten bigger? Like, oh, you wrote a book, you should, every investment you make should be, perfect. I mean, how do you how have you managed those expectations?
I mean, the first and easy and fun answer is badly. So to the extent that I've been invited to things and I go, my imposter syndrome increases or it stays the same.
Right.
And I would actually say to a lot of people, if you're not feeling imposter syndrome, then, you're not working hard enough or something. So it's okay to feel imposter syndrome. Don't expect, if you were somebody who wants to live a successful life, don't expect that you can have that success without feeling like an imposter.
Right.
And maybe if you're a highly narcissistic personality, dare I mention Trump, he doesn't feel like he's an imposter. But I think a lot of people very truly do feel like imposters.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the start of the conversation about taking risk. Like if you're taking risk, you're putting yourself out there a little bit more, you're taking a risk, I think you naturally will have a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Pressure. So if you're not slightly uncomfortable, then you're probably not living your life right. What comes up for me is, I remember playing with my daughter, where I would kind of like pretend to be some wild animal, and I was going to bite her neck, and it was fascinating because if I did it not enough, it was kind of boring and whatever. If I did it too much, she, the quality of her little squeals and yells would get to a level where she was not having fun anymore. And you had to find the sweet spot.
Right.
And the sweet spot was awesome, and it took me a while to realize that because I can do this even better. And it's like, oh shit, she's not having fun anymore. In a way, that's how we need to manage ourselves, is get to that sweet spot of like just the right amount.
Right, yeah.
I think that maybe is easier for you and me than people who are real adrenaline freaks, where they're not taking, what did you call it? Not calculated risks, but reckless.
Reckless, yeah.
They only feel alive when they're taking reckless risks. So maybe those people shouldn't listen to us.
Well, I think I explain that though when I'm talking to students about like the stock market. I think it's very important for new investors to realize that yes, we talk about this thing, the stock market, but there's so many layers to it. The people who are day traders, the people who are just option traders, you can treat it as a casino. I mean, you can literally go into it and be like red, black, doing crazy things. And so there's multiple levels of market. It's like, which part do you want to be a part of? Do you want to be on the surface where you get all the waves going, and you're feeling all the, all the movements, or do you want to move lower in the water where it's calmer because you've taken the time to kind of build that solid foundation where you're able to, be underneath all the fray that's happening on top.
And the answer to your question of as things have grown bigger, how do I manage it? And I think it's responsive to what you're saying right now is that, so this is true for me. I can't say it's true for everybody, but it's about building systems, and systems don't come naturally to me.
Right.
I'm not a systematic guy. I'm a guy who's curious and goes down rabbit holes, but in a way, for me, it's even more important to build systems. The systems that will help me, and the systems have to modify and change. I mean, I was something that I learned from Monish. So I meet Monish, and then the next thing I know, or I only met him by phone or by email. He invites me to his partnership meeting. And so that was a system for Monish to draw people into his investment business. And it was really clever. And I was like, my God. So I started doing it. And so, we used to include an invitation in our annual report to a partnership meeting, to our partnership meetings. Now, at some point, too many people are coming to the partnership meeting, and kind of like people who are not a contributor, a drain of energy. So we've had to modify the way we do the invitations.
Yeah.
And so you modify your systems as you go along. It may be that, it's interesting. So I was at, maybe we can get him to have a conversation with Chris Bloomstrand, amazing guy, the world's best analyst of Berkshire Hathaway there is out there. You can just go find him. He's on Twitter. He's got a website, read his annual letters. It's just incredible. And he's often drawn for commentary. So I was at a cocktail party at his home, and I saw Value Line. And I used to get Value Line, and then I stopped getting it. I was like, dang, it's not that expensive. I want Value Line back. But I'm going to treat Value Line differently now. So what I used to do is like keep the thing on the shelf and replace the new one and take the old one out. Now I'm going to buy Value Line and I'm going to treat it like The Economist. Is I'm just going to take it with me and flip through, basically.
Right.
And tear out pages that are interesting to me. So that's a modification of my process. So,
and I think that's, as you get more success and all those, I think about protecting the habits, protecting my day that allowed me to do the things that got to me to where I am. Like, you have to protect those things because you got to allow yourself the time. As you have like more demands on your time, I think it gets harder,
What's funny is for me, something kind of opposite has happened, which is that 25 years ago, I was like a man with a Bloomberg, I think they used to call it, or two men with a Bloomberg. And I'd meet, I was single then. And so people say, wow, you mean you're the CEO of the business? And I'd say, yeah, I'm also the mailman, the receptionist. Right. And I think that, the last 25 years, I've spent more than half my time on admin side stuff, keeping the thing ticking over, doing the things I need to do in order for it to be a business. And it's only in the last 5 years that I've been freed up from that, and I can focus more on research, for example. And so sometimes we have to do certain things just to keep the balls up in the air, and eventually we find the people. Something that you haven't asked me the question, but it came up for me earlier today, and it's a piece of wisdom that for me that I appreciate being able to repeat it, which is that for the longest time I was trying to find people who help me who were just like me. You don't want somebody like me helping you. You need somebody with a very different mindset. And I didn't believe those people exist, but they do exist, and they're awesome. And so for me, I think that the time I have to do investment research has expanded, actually.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great place to be able to go to.
I mean, that's something that worries me, actually. And so here I'm going on an edge where it kind of like I'm going to tell a truth about me that kind of scares me a little bit, but it is the truth. Is that I love learning about all sorts of things. I'm having an enormous amount of fun in the rucksack that I brought to this is a book of the history of the Renaissance in Europe. Why am I reading that? I just want to know. There are so many parts of the Renaissance that I don't know, and so I go to somebody who ought to be a mutual friend if he isn't yet, Sarab Madan, who's the guy who hosted me at the Google Talk that you brought up yesterday. I say, Sarab, what bothers me is that I'm spending time doing that. But I can be pretty clear that is not going to lead to better investment idea, better investment decision making. So I feel he had an interesting answer for me. He said, Christopher Nolan, one of the most amazing movie directors ever. Oppenheimer. I mean, it turns out that even so Guy, I think the name of the actor is Guy Pearce. Why am I blanking on the movie? It's about a number of other movies where he did Interstellar. Is that right?
That's right.
And I'm just blanking, but it's about a guy who has an accident, or he suffers from an attack where he only remembers the last 15 minutes of his life and everything before the accident. And so he's done some amazing movies, and he plays with time. And Sarah tells me, look, that guy has a habit of just exploring with no particular reason in mind, and you don't know where that will lead you. So it's a good thing to be doing.
And I think that just to be a good investor, you have to be a student of the world, because there's so much going on. There's so many different kinds of companies. I think that natural curiosity for most of the investors that I've talked to, the good and the best investors, they have that natural curiosity because it takes them down a certain path, and then they discover this company or this investment that they could potentially do.
Yeah, except that I have a voice in my head. We all have voices in our heads that we need to pay attention to. I have a voice in my head saying, why are you doing this? Is a waste of time.
Right.
And then I also have this image in my mind. And it was really, a huge takeaway for me from the Buffett lunch was that, and it came across in all sorts of different ways. Warren has a very narrow focus.
Sure.
And it's not like he wakes up every morning and says, I need to have a narrow focus because I want to be a really good investor. That just is who he is.
Right.
He has that narrow focus. So I can come and start talking to Warren about Christopher Nolan movies, and he'd be like, "Yeah, whatever."
Right. Yeah.
Hey, Warren, I got a new book about Chris Nolan's process. He'd be like, "Yeah, send it to a friend because I'm not interested in reading
Yeah.
it."
Well,
And I am interested in reading it.
Well, it's like yesterday I said, I started studying Warren Buffett, got introduced to Charlie Munger, and I said, man, I thought I was a Buffett, but I'm more of a Charlie. I think that's what a lot of people, because Charlie had so many other interests, the architecture piece, like he was just so naturally curious on so many other things. And it's okay. I mean, that's okay. It's okay to lean into that.
But Charlie Munger disappointed me. And it kind of left me cold, and I profoundly disagree with him. And actually, so Chris Bloomstrand regrets that he didn't take one or two opportunities. He could have gone and had dinner with Charlie Munger. I never was around a table like that with Charlie Munger, but I would have asked him this question, which is, Charlie, you leave me cold when you say that you don't read literature anymore. Mm-hmm. It really does leave me cold. Yeah. And I just, if you're such a Renaissance man, how can you say that you don't read it? And he did. He said it, and I kind of found that, and I don't know what to make of it, because it's at odds with your idea of him being a truly Renaissance man.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point. Yeah. I think we might have to do a part 2. We're out of time. It goes quick. It always goes faster. I got like all these questions. There's so much we didn't talk.
Try a few more.
I wanted to, like, I don't know if I've ever heard like how you got interested in investing. You'll have to be quick, but like where did your love for investing come from?
So I think that in my case, and I can identify in others, I have an anxious side to my personality. So financial security was important to me.
Right.
I remember my father getting an HP 12C calculator when I was, sort of like high single digits age. And we would have been living in Iran at the time. I don't know when the HP 12C came out.
It's still out. I torture my students with that still.
But I remember reading the little instruction booklet and discovering compound interest. And I remember playing around with rates of interest and initial sums. And I was blown away. It was like so exciting to me. And I really need to think about it more, because this is before Warren Buffett, before investing.
Yes, of course. I mean, the spark has to be
and
early.
I was like, but I could see with the calculator that if you put in a number and you had a rate of interest, it turned into a huge amount of money. And I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. No, I talk about it all the time. Like, I'm amazed that I get to like make money off these companies and I never have to step foot inside of them. And it's legal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an amazing thing that I can invest in. I can invest in Amazon or Apple or Coca-Cola or all these amazing, amazing businesses. I mean, it's amazing that we're at a point, in world history that you have the ability to do that, to be able to do that. I think it's just that it's pure fundamental. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that go wrong with it, but a lot of like just pure fundamentally, it's an amazing thing to be able to actually be able to do that.
So I came across that. But then I was 25 or 24. I remember telling a friend, if I could get $100 million to trust me, then I think that those investors are not going to worry about where my children go to school and what holidays I take.
Right.
So that was age 24, 25, something like that. Mm-hmm. But I was a really slow starter, if you like.
Yeah, I think, the key is that you started, the consistency, the moving one leg in front of the other. I mean, you have to that's the way it starts. I don't think people, you don't start like where you're at. I think that's the thing that I try to talk to students about and just people watching this is that you have to start from where you're at and you have to be consistent and make consistent decisions and make a conscious effort to progress a little bit every single day.
And something that I would leave the listeners with in this installment episode, which is a conversation that I've been having with one of my children. So taking the first step. So one of my children is considering a career in law. And, taking the first step doesn't mean you're about to become a lawyer. It just means you took a step in that direction.
Yeah.
And what I was sharing with her is you take a step and then you reevaluate the world. And you can even take the step back if it was the wrong step.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that the direction you took, you're going to continue. You can go left, right. You can redirect. But you can only bring yourself to a certain point through thought. Then you have to take a step.
Yes.
And just that one step is all you need to do, and it will change your perspective. And I feel like I come across a lot of people who have kind of analyzed it out 10,000 steps out, and they're trying to figure out whether they should take the first step. It's like, no.
Yeah. Well, it's like with investing. Like, you can read all the investment books you want to read. You can do all the stuff, but at some point you got to be on the dance floor. You got to make the first investment.
Yeah.
Because it changes. Because most people, especially when it comes to risk, they think their risk tolerance is one thing, but their risk tolerance is something completely different when their money is actually out there.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's like, if you haven't made the investment, we can't even have this conversation.
Yes.
You know,
everybody's a long-term investor, and guess until they, down 50%.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the Mike Tyson quote. It's the everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, which is a great way to end this. So I really want to thank you for taking this opportunity, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Well, Ryan, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've learned an enormous amount from you already, and it's a real pleasure to have this friendship relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And what I said at the very beginning about you having an inner scorecard, it's really true. And I think that the more friends I have who have an inner scorecard, the better I'll be at emphasizing the inner scorecard of my life. So thank you so much for being a part of my life.
Thank you for the kind words. I truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you.